At exactly 6 p.m., every device on Earth activated at the same time. Most people assumed it was another weather warning or a network failure until they read the message. The alert appeared in every language simultaneously. Authorities instructed civilians to avoid all mirrors and reflective surfaces between 7 p.m. and sunrise. The warning specifically mentioned bathroom mirrors, car mirrors, shop windows, televisions with powered-off screens, polished metal, and still water. Citizens were advised to cover reflective surfaces if possible. No explanation followed. There was no mention of terrorism, natural disasters, war, or cyber attacks. Only mirrors. Within minutes, social media exploded. Some people treated it like a joke. Others assumed it was a publicity stunt. Theories spread faster than officials could deny them. By 6:30 p.m., hardware stores had sold out of blankets, sheets, tape, cardboard, and newspapers as nervous families began covering mirrors throughout their homes. Others laughed at what they considered the strangest government mistake in modern history. At 6:47 p.m., governments across multiple countries held emergency press conferences. None of them answered a single question. Officials simply repeated the warning and advised people to remain indoors until sunrise. The refusal to explain the situation frightened people more than the alert itself. By 6:55 p.m., airports shut down flights. Train stations suspended operations. Major highways emptied. Entire cities entered a silence that normally only followed national tragedies. Then 7 p.m. arrived. Nothing happened. The streets remained quiet. The lights stayed on. The internet continued functioning normally. For the first 30 minutes, people began mocking the alert online. Videos appeared showing individuals standing in front of mirrors, waving at cameras and laughing. Some gained millions of views within minutes. Then the videos started disappearing. At first, people blamed moderation systems. Soon they realized the accounts themselves had vanished. Profiles that had existed for years disappeared completely. Photographs, messages, followers, and entire histories vanished, as though those users had never existed. Friends searching for their accounts found nothing. The people themselves were still physically present, only their digital existence had been erased. By 8 p.m., reports began appearing from hospitals. Patients claimed their reflections had moved a fraction of a second too late. Doctors initially blamed stress. The reports continued arriving. Different cities, different countries, the same description. The reflection lagged behind. Not by much, sometimes less than half a second. Just enough for people to notice. By 8:43 p.m., emergency services became overwhelmed with calls. Most involved reflections behaving incorrectly. A man washing his hands noticed his reflection looking up before he did. A woman passing a shop window saw her reflection continue walking after she had stopped. Several callers reported reflections staring directly at them while they slept. Authorities still refused to explain anything. Instead, they updated the alert. Avoid looking into reflective surfaces for prolonged periods. Do not investigate unusual movement. Do not attempt to record the phenomenon. Remain calm. The wording only increased public panic. By 10 p.m., internet users began comparing experiences. Patterns emerged quickly. The reflection never moved first while directly observed. The movement only happened in peripheral vision. People noticed it while turning away, while blinking, while glancing sideways, never while staring directly at the mirror. It was as if the reflections understood when they were being watched. Around midnight, the first footage leaked online. A security camera inside a closed convenience store recorded a worker walking past a refrigerator door. The reflection in the glass stopped walking. The real person continued moving through the frame. The reflection remained standing still, watching. The footage lasted only 7 seconds before the recording corrupted. Experts confirmed the file had not been edited. By 1 a.m., power usage across entire countries had dropped to record lows. Families sat together in dark rooms, avoiding televisions and windows. People covered bathroom mirrors with towels and blankets. Children were moved away from bedrooms containing reflective furniture. Entire cities waited for sunrise. Then the second alert arrived. Unlike the first message, this one contained only a single sentence. If your reflection smiles first, leave the room immediately. Panic spread faster than before. Some people abandoned their homes. Others destroyed mirrors with hammers and furniture. Videos showed shattered glass covering living room floors and streets littered with broken shop windows. Authorities did not discourage the destruction. In some countries, officials quietly joined in. By 2 a.m., reports became stranger. People claimed mirrors reflected rooms that were slightly different from reality. Furniture appeared misplaced. Doors appeared open when they should have been closed. Lights appeared on in empty houses. One report described a family photograph showing an extra person standing in the background. Nobody recognized the face. Investigators initially dismissed these stories until similar reports arrived from hundreds of unrelated locations. The details changed. The pattern remained the same. Something inside the reflections no longer matched the world outside them. At 3:18 a.m., observatories around the world reported an unrelated but disturbing discovery. For reasons nobody could explain, Earth was no longer producing reflections in orbit. Satellite images showed oceans without glare, cities without light reflections, clouds without shine. From space, Earth appeared strangely dull, as though the planet itself had forgotten how to reflect light. Scientists searching historical records eventually discovered something even more disturbing. The same event had happened once before. The records dated back to 1927. Governments at the time had covered mirrors, shut down cities, and sealed public buildings for an entire night. The event lasted until sunrise. Official reports claimed nothing unusual had occurred. Every witness account had been classified. Every photograph had disappeared. Every surviving document ended abruptly after mentioning a single phrase. Do not let them realize you can see them. At 4:06 a.m., emergency operators across multiple countries stopped receiving calls about moving reflections. Instead, callers reported something worse. The reflections had stopped moving entirely. People standing in front of mirrors found themselves staring at perfectly still copies. No blinking, no breathing, no movement whatsoever. The reflections simply stood there, watching, waiting, and for the first time since the alerts began, authorities issued an order that made little sense at the time. Do not go near mirrors at sunrise. Whatever happens, do not look when the sun rises. Outside, darkness slowly began giving way to morning. Inside millions of homes, people sat in silence facing covered mirrors, closed windows, and dark television screens. Waiting for daylight, waiting for answers, waiting to discover why governments across the world feared sunrise more than the night itself. Sunrise arrived at 5:41 a.m. Across the world, millions of people sat in dark rooms waiting for the warning to end. Most expected relief. Instead, the third alert arrived exactly 1 minute before dawn. Authorities instructed civilians to keep mirrors covered until further notice. No countdown was provided. No explanation accompanied the order. For the first time since the emergency began, several governments disabled public comments on official announcements. People immediately understood what that meant. Whatever was happening had not ended. It had only reached the part officials were afraid to describe. As daylight spread across cities, reports began flooding emergency services once again. The callers were no longer reporting movement. The reflections were gone. Entire households uncovered their mirrors only to find empty rooms staring back at them. Bathroom mirrors reflected sinks and walls, but not the people standing directly in front of them. Car mirrors reflected roads without drivers. Shop windows reflected streets without pedestrians. For several hours, humanity simply stopped appearing in reflections. Scientists attempted explanations involving light, optics, and neurological effects, but none survived basic testing. Cameras confirmed the phenomenon. The mirrors were recording empty spaces where human beings should have been standing. Animals still appeared normally. Furniture appeared normally. Everything reflected except people. By mid-morning, panic had begun replacing fear. The movement during the night had at least implied something was present. The absence implied something had left. Investigators reviewing security footage from the previous evening discovered something even worse. The reflections had not vanished at sunrise. They had walked away. Frame-by-frame analysis showed reflections turning and leaving mirrors moments before dawn. Some exited through reflected doors that did not exist. Others disappeared around reflected corners that had no equivalent in reality. One recording showed an office worker standing perfectly still in front of a mirror, while his reflection calmly walked out of frame. The real man never moved. The reflection never returned. Governments attempted to suppress the footage. By then it was impossible. Millions had already seen it. By noon, the first physical incidents began. Witnesses described people behaving strangely around reflective surfaces. Some stood motionless in front of covered mirrors for hours. Others repeatedly checked their phones despite the screens being turned off. Several attempted to uncover mirrors that family members had deliberately hidden. Medical examinations found nothing unusual. The affected individuals insisted they felt incomplete. Some described the sensation as losing a limb. Others compared it to forgetting a family member's face. The descriptions varied. The feeling remained the same. Something was missing. Shortly after sunset, observatories reported another anomaly. Light reaching Earth had changed very slightly. The difference was almost too small to measure. Almost. For reasons nobody understood, mirrors were no longer reversing images correctly. Words appeared normal instead of reversed. Movements occurred on the same side instead of the opposite side. Left had become left. Right had become right. The laws governing reflections themselves had changed. That discovery forced governments to release information they had hidden for almost a century. In 1927, an identical event had occurred. It lasted exactly 36 hours. The official death toll was listed as 17. The real number had been considerably higher. Survivors from the event all described the same experience. They felt watched whenever they approached reflective surfaces. Several reported seeing figures standing behind them despite being alone. Others claimed their reflections occasionally failed to imitate small movements. Most disturbing of all, a handful of survivors insisted their reflections had eventually returned. Different. The government dismissed those claims at the time. Until investigators opened the old archives. The recovered interviews revealed patterns nobody had noticed in 1927. The survivors, who claimed their reflections returned, had all undergone personality changes afterwards. Minor differences at first. Changed handwriting. Different food preferences. Forgotten memories. Gradually, the differences became impossible to ignore. Parents failed to recognize their own children. Spouses described partners who looked identical but behaved like strangers wearing familiar faces. One investigation discovered a survivor who suddenly spoke a language he had never learned. Another developed memories of places he had never visited. The authorities reached a conclusion they never released publicly. The reflections had not returned. Something else had returned in their place. By the second night, fear had transformed into obsession. Millions gathered around covered mirrors waiting for signs of movement. Then, at exactly 9:14 p.m., the reflections began coming back. One by one. Mirror by mirror. The first reports sounded encouraging. People were visible again. Faces appeared normal, movements matched perfectly. Governments immediately issued another warning. Do not trust immediate confirmation. Observe for discrepancies. The message spread too slowly. Most people simply felt relieved to see themselves again. The relief lasted less than an hour. The inconsistencies started small. Wedding rings appearing on the wrong hand. Books positioned differently. Scratches appearing on furniture that did not exist outside the mirror. Then came the memories. People began remembering conversations that had never happened. Vacations they had never taken. Schools they had never attended. Entire years of life that nobody else remembered. Hospitals became overwhelmed with patients insisting their childhood homes had different layouts. Others swore they had siblings who had never existed. The memories felt real. More real than real. Then investigators discovered the pattern. The false memories matched across unrelated individuals. Thousands remembered the same restaurants, the same streets, the same cities, places that did not exist anywhere on Earth. Around midnight, a final classified report from 1927 was released to world leaders. The report contained only a single conclusion. The reflections were never copies. Human beings were. For every person who stood before a mirror, there had always been two versions. One on each side. For reasons nobody understood, something had briefly opened the boundary between both worlds every few generations. During the exchange, each side believed they were the original. Neither side could prove otherwise. The realization spread through governments with terrifying speed. The question was no longer whether the reflections had returned. The question was whether humanity had returned. At 2:07 a.m., the final emergency alert appeared across every screen on Earth. The message contained only 8 words. If you remember crossing over, do not report it. No explanation followed. No further alerts were ever issued. 3 days later, life slowly returned to normal. Flights resumed. Schools reopened. News coverage moved on. Official investigations quietly disappeared. The world accepted the event the same way it accepts earthquakes and storms. As something terrible that happened, and eventually passed. Years later, people still occasionally noticed small inconsistencies. Photographs they did not remember taking. Scars they could not explain. Memories that belonged to someone else. Most ignored them. Most preferred not to think about them, because there was one question nobody wanted answered. If the thing inside the mirror had spent an entire lifetime believing it was the reflection, what proof existed that it was wrong?